Walk into a modern grocery store and, at first glance, nothing seems broken. The produce is stacked high. The lights are bright. The shelves are full. Sale signs hang everywhere. Music plays overhead. Carts roll by. Checkout lanes keep moving. On the surface, it still feels like abundance. And yet, the moment people start putting things in the cart, a very different reality appears. They pause longer. They compare more. They put items back. The cart looks smaller, but the receipt still lands harder than expected. That contradiction is where a lot of Americans are living right now. And if that feels familiar, it is important to say this clearly from the start. This is not just about discipline. It is not because people suddenly forgot how to shop. The system itself changed. Stores still know how to look comfortable, stable, and full, even while the cost underneath keeps shifting against the customer. That is why this feels so disorienting. Nothing visibly collapsed. The shelves stayed stocked. The packaging still looks polished. But ordinary life got harder anyway. America still looks abundant from the outside. But for millions of households, the feeling of abundance quietly disappeared. And once you see the pattern, you start to understand why a normal shopping trip can feel strangely heavy, even in a store that appears to be doing just fine. The first part of that pattern is visual. Modern stores are designed to feel rich. Big supermarkets do not just sell products, they sell reassurance. Wide aisles, bright produce, endless brands, seasonal displays, bakery smells, freezer walls packed with choices, bold tags promising discounts, digital coupons flashing on apps. Everything is arranged to send the same message. There is plenty here. And visually, that message works. You can stand in front of 30 types of cereal, 15 pasta sauces, rows of frozen meals, towers of bottled drinks, and feel like the system is functioning normally. Because in one sense, it is. The products are there. But presence is not the same as comfort. That is the trap hidden in modern retail. Choice can stay wide even while affordability narrows. Stores can look prosperous long after the customer stops feeling that prosperity personally. A family can walk through a fully stocked building and still feel restricted aisle by aisle. That is why the experience feels confusing. The environment says abundance. The budget says caution. The control shift here is simple but powerful. Stop using the appearance of abundance as proof that prices are reasonable. Those are now two separate things. A store can look healthy while your purchasing power is quietly weaker inside it. Once you separate those two signals, the pressure starts to make more sense. And that leads to what many people feel most directly. Full shelves no longer mean comfort. For a long time, a stocked store meant relief. It meant the basics were available, dinner could be figured out, the week could move forward. Now, many people walk into the same kind of store and feel something else first: restriction. Not because food is missing, but because flexibility is missing. That shows up in small, familiar ways. Smaller carts, fewer extras, less meat, less fresh fruit than they wanted. One snack instead of 3. Maybe the name brand gets replaced with the store brand. Maybe the prepared food gets skipped. Maybe the cart still gets filled. But more of it is shelf-stable, less fragile, more defensive. You can see this in the quiet behavior of ordinary shoppers. People circle back before committing. They check unit prices. They calculate meals in reverse. They ask not what sounds good, but what stretches. Not what feels convenient, but what wastes the least. That emotional shift matters. Because the issue is no longer simple availability. The issue is purchasing power. In other words, the modern grocery store can still offer almost everything, while the household can no longer comfortably say yes to very much of it. That is a different kind of scarcity, harder to photograph, easier to dismiss, but deeply real. The control shift is to shop based on function, not display. Which items actually carry the week? Which purchases reduce waste, stretch across multiple meals, and leave less exposed to spoilage? That mindset does not remove the pressure, but it helps you work with reality instead of the store's atmosphere. And once that pressure started building, another change made it even harder to track. Shrinkflation quietly changed everything. One reason people feel so unsettled is that many products still look almost exactly the same. Same colors, same branding, same shelf position. At a glance, the same familiar box or bottle shape, but underneath, the value changed. The cereal box is a little narrower. The frozen meal is lighter. The snack bag has more air and less product. Paper towels have fewer sheets. Detergent bottles look compact and efficient, but the load count quietly drops. Canned goods, coffee, crackers, ice cream, yogurt, even household basics people buy almost automatically have been reduced in subtle ways. This is not always dramatic enough to notice in a single trip. That is what makes it effective. The store still looks stable. Your habits still follow familiar packaging. But the quantity keeps moving under your feet. The customer is asked to react to change without being given a clean visual signal that change happened. That creates psychological friction. You are not imagining the feeling that things do not go as far as they used to. They often do not. The control shift is to stop trusting package familiarity. Familiar does not mean unchanged. Look at ounces, count, load total, and servings that are realistic, not idealized. When people do that consistently, shrinkflation loses some of its power because the illusion weakens. And that illusion connects directly to another problem that catches people off guard. The cheap option got more expensive too. A lot of shoppers still look for lower sticker prices first. That makes sense. If one item costs less on the shelf, it feels safer in the moment. But increasingly, the lower upfront price is not the better value. It is just the smaller commitment. This shows up everywhere. A smaller detergent bottle may cost less today, but more per load. A compact coffee container may feel manageable, but cost more per ounce. Smaller packs of paper towels, snacks, canned foods, and pantry staples often carry the highest unit price in the aisle. Single items can be especially expensive because convenience now carries a markup almost everywhere. That creates a brutal dynamic for households under pressure. The people with the least flexibility often have to buy the version that costs more over time, simply because the larger, better value option requires more cash up front. So the problem is not just high prices, it is pricing structure. Stores know many shoppers are trying to control the total at checkout, not optimize every ounce. That is understandable. But it also means households can get trapped paying more for less while thinking they chose the cheaper path. The control shift is not to buy the biggest size automatically. It is to compare the usable value. Unit pricing matters most on products you buy repeatedly and finish consistently. If a larger package will be fully used and not wasted, it protects your money better. If it will spoil or sit half-used, it is not a value. That distinction gives control back. And that pricing pressure changed behavior far beyond low-income households. The middle class started shopping defensively. This may be one of the clearest signs that the system changed. Defensive shopping used to be more strongly associated with households in obvious financial crisis. Now it reaches much further. Middle-income families rotate between stores, chase sales cycles, delay restocking, lean harder on store brands, cut extras without talking about it, and treat restaurant meals like occasional events instead of routine convenience. Leftovers get stretched more deliberately. Pantry meals come back into rotation. Shelf-stable foods become a kind of backup plan. Some of this looks responsible from the outside, and some of it is. But it also reflects pressure. People are not just becoming smarter shoppers in a vacuum. They are adapting to a landscape that punishes casual buying. The old buffer is thinner. One unplanned expense, one higher utility bill, one larger insurance payment, and the grocery trip changes immediately. That is why this trend matters. When the middle class starts buying with a defensive posture, it signals that ordinary stability no longer feels automatic. The control shift is to recognize defensive shopping as information, not failure. If your household has become more strategic, that does not mean you did something wrong. It means you are responding to real pressure with awareness. And awareness is always more useful than denial. But grocery stress does not begin in the grocery store. Housing quietly absorbed everything else. For many households, the real squeeze starts before food is even considered. Rent climbed. Mortgage costs changed. Property taxes moved up. Insurance rose. Maintenance became more expensive. Utilities became less predictable. In many places, keeping a roof over your head now claims a larger share of income than it used to. That changes the emotional weight of every other purchase. Groceries may be the place where the pressure becomes visible, but housing often creates the pressure first. After the fixed bills clear, what remains has less room in it. So food starts feeling heavy not only because food costs more, but because the household is arriving at the store already financially compressed. This is why two people can look at the same grocery receipt and experience it differently. One has margin, the other has already been drained by housing, utilities, insurance, and upkeep before the cart was even touched. So when people say groceries suddenly feel harder, they are often describing a full system problem, not an isolated food problem. The control shift here is mental as much as practical. Treat grocery pressure as part of a larger cash flow picture. That reduces self-blame. It also helps households focus on the expenses that silently increase the weight of every shopping trip, even when the supermarket itself looks unchanged. And once money started tightening at home, another kind of drain spread quietly in the background. The subscription economy expanded everywhere. A streaming charge here, a delivery membership there, cloud storage, software access, app upgrades, security plans, digital media, convenience services. Monthly billing has moved into so many corners of life that a household can lose a surprising amount of money before even thinking about groceries, gas, or medicine. What makes subscriptions so effective is not that each one is enormous. It is that they are designed to feel forgettable. $10, $15, a free trial that turns permanent, a service tied to another service, a charge that looks harmless because it arrives alone. But modern life now leaks money through repetition. And when enough of those small withdrawals stack up, they reduce flexibility where people feel it most. At the store, at the pump, at the pharmacy, at the end of the month. This matters because a household can feel responsible and still be under pressure from systems built around auto-renewal and low-visibility billing. Again, this is not only about discipline, it is also about design. The control shift is to make recurring charges visible all at once. Not to panic, not to cut everything joyfully, but to know what is quietly claiming monthly income before necessities even arrive. Visibility turns a leak into a decision. And for many viewers, especially those over 50, all of this feels sharper for a reason. Older Americans often feel this more intensely because they remember a different baseline. This is not nostalgia pretending everything used to be perfect. It is pattern memory. People who have been shopping, paying bills, and raising households for decades remember when ordinary purchases required less mental strain. Packaging stayed more stable. Portions felt more generous. Price changes happened, but not with the same relentless speed or frequency. A trip to the store involved choices, but not this much second-guessing. That difference matters. Because when someone over 50 says everyday life feels more exhausting financially, that is not proof they failed to adapt. It often means they are comparing the present to a much more predictable system. They remember when a familiar brand meant a familiar size, when a normal week did not require constant scanning for hidden reductions, when the baseline of daily life felt steadier. That memory can make today feel harsher, but it can also make the pattern easier to identify. Older shoppers often notice instability faster because they have a longer reference point. The control shift is to trust that comparison instead of dismissing it. If shopping feels more mentally demanding than it once did, that perception is valuable. It tells you the environment changed. You are not simply becoming worse at managing it. And that change is not just financial, it is psychological. The emotional cost of constant calculation is easy to underestimate. Most people do not break down over one grocery trip. What wears them down is repetition. The mental math. The checking account checks. The app comparisons. The unit price reading. The decision about whether this item can wait another week. The low-level tension of wondering whether the total will cross the line you were trying to hold. That kind of calculation drains attention. And because it happens around basic needs, it creates a special kind of fatigue. Food is not optional. Soap is not optional. Paper products, medicine, household staples, utilities, transportation. These are not luxury decisions. So when basic purchasing starts demanding constant analysis, ordinary life becomes mentally louder. That is why a fully stocked store can still feel exhausting. Abundance is sitting right there in front of you, but access to it requires continuous filtering, trade-offs, and self-restraint. So here is a useful question in the middle of all this. When was the last time a normal shopping trip actually felt relaxing? If that question lands a little harder than expected, there is a reason. You are probably recognizing a pattern, not a personal weakness. The same pressure keeps showing up in different forms. Smaller sizes, higher unit costs, less flexibility, more calculation. It is not random. And if you have adapted by becoming more observant, more selective, and less impulsive, that is not a sign that life defeated you. It is a sign that you are paying attention. That awareness is what restores control, which helps explain why this whole period feels so strange in the first place. Historically, economic decline was often easier to see. Factories closed. Unemployment rose visibly. Shelves went empty. Lines formed. Shortages announced themselves in a way people could recognize quickly. The environment itself communicated that something was wrong. Modern decline often looks different. The shelves are still full. The stores still look polished. The apps still promise deals. The economy can continue performing normalcy visually, even while affordability deteriorates underneath. So people receive mixed signals. Their eyes say abundance. Their bank balance says caution. Their surroundings say prosperity. Their daily choices say limitation. That split creates confusion. It is hard to name a problem when the old visual signs of trouble are missing. And when people cannot name it, they often blame themselves for feeling stressed in a place that looks completely normal. But the problem is real. It just wears better packaging now. The control shift is recognition. Once you understand that modern scarcity often appears as full shelves with weaker purchasing power, the contradiction stops feeling mysterious. You can respond more clearly when you know what you are actually looking at. And for many households, one response has already become common. Credit cards became temporary shock absorbers. A lot of grocery spending now gets pushed onto credit not because people are being reckless, but because cash flow has become less stable than the bill schedule. Groceries land before payday. Utility costs come in high. Insurance hits. Car repairs happen. Prescription costs show up. The card becomes the bridge. That bridge can feel harmless at first because it solves an immediate problem. The food gets bought. The week keeps moving. No visible crisis occurs. But when a card starts carrying basics month after month, the pressure does not disappear. It spreads forward. Interest, rollover balances, minimum payments, and delayed catch-up costs turn today's grocery stress into tomorrow's financial drag. The same is true for buy now, pay later systems and installment-style spending. They are often marketed around convenience, but in practice they can become tools for smoothing instability. That framing matters. Many people are not overspending wildly. They are trying to keep normal life functioning while income and expenses stop lining up cleanly. The control shift is to see credit as a pressure signal. If essentials are regularly landing on borrowed time, that is not a moral failure. It is useful information about how tight the system has become. And once that pattern is visible, households can make calmer decisions about where the real strain is coming from. Eventually, all of this reaches beyond receipts and balances. There has been a quiet loss of everyday comfort. This may be the part people feel most deeply and talk about the least. It is not only that groceries cost more or household bills rose. It is that life itself becomes narrower when so much energy goes into protecting the basics. Restaurants get avoided more often. Small trips get postponed. Hobbies shrink. Social outings become rarer. Spontaneous purchases start feeling irresponsible. Even simple pleasures can begin to carry a shadow of calculation behind them. That changes daily life in a way spreadsheets do not fully capture. People are not just buying less. They are giving up a certain ease, a sense that there was room for a little flexibility, a little enjoyment. a little unplanned comfort without consequences. When that space disappears, life can remain outwardly functional while feeling inwardly tighter. And that is part of why this era feels so emotionally different. The loss is not dramatic enough to make headlines every day, but it is steady enough to change how people live. The control shift is to recognize that protecting your money is also about protecting room to breathe. Waste matters. Hidden markups matter. Recurring leaks matter. Not because every dollar must be optimized perfectly, but because flexibility itself has become valuable. And when you step back, the full pattern comes into view. America still performs abundance extremely well. The shelves are full. The packaging is attractive. The stores are clean. The choices are everywhere. From the outside, it can all look normal enough to make people question their own experience. But underneath that appearance, several things changed at once. Purchasing power weakened. Package sizes shrank. Unit costs got trickier. Housing took a larger share. Subscriptions multiplied. Credit filled gaps. Mental effort increased. Everyday comfort narrowed. That is why so many people feel squeezed in places that still look prosperous. The visual system stayed full longer than the financial system stayed comfortable. And once you understand that, something important shifts. You stop measuring reality by how stocked the shelves look. You start watching for the deeper pattern instead. How much usable value is actually there? How much flexibility your household still has after fixed costs? Which purchases truly carry their weight? Which charges quietly drain control? Which products create convenience and which simply create the illusion of affordability? That kind of awareness does not fix inflation by itself. It does not lower rent or shrink an insurance bill overnight. But it does something meaningful. It removes confusion. It reduces self-blame. It helps you see that the pressure is structural, repeated, and recognizable. And once something becomes recognizable, it becomes easier to respond to calmly. The shelves stayed full longer than the feeling of security did. That is the contradiction many households have been living inside. Not collapse, but erosion. Not obvious shortage, but thinner control. Not empty stores, but a slower disappearance of ease. If this kind of calm consumer awareness helps make sense of what everyday life suddenly feels like, consider subscribing.